panel, and we will be and in Istanbul forum, and we will be talking about this concept in order to be more explicit. It was discussed reflections, the position of Istanbul and the conjuncture of Istanbul in new order. So this was discussed, and we will also talk about Istanbul, the voice of Turkey, and about the voice of Turkey about the Islamic issues. We will be talking about and the perspective of academicians, and in the construction of new era, what are the opinions of our academicians and our philosophers. So we will be addressing these issues together with our members of scientific board. Normally we would have 20 minutes for each of our panelists, but due to the Juma prayer, our time is limited, so we will allocate 10 minutes for each of our speakers. Mr. Ibrahim, Halil, Üçer, I will give the microphone first of all to you so that you will continue your presentation in the area of will and order. Mr. Ahmet, thank you very much. Dear speakers, distinguished guests, I would like to thank Cihan Numa Foundation for their contributions to this panel and to this forum, Istanbul Forum. Well, I will be enunciating the vision and mission of Istanbul Forum, and I will also take into account the last 300 years of Islamic world, and we will question what is going on as the Muslims, the problem or the efforts of existence. So we will be talking about our questions. Where are we now, and what have we achieved so far? What have we done so far? So what can be assessed? In general, humanity and Islamic world is confronting a crisis of order, and this crisis of order is not limited to the political arena, but in the international scale we see the shift of power, we see the rebalancing of power, we see different ideals for, and we don't see the transition. When we talk about the crisis of order, what we observe in earthquakes, at deeper fractions under the earthquake, we address this. With these fractions, there are two important subjects. One of them is in the 18th century, starting from 18th century, the existence, knowledge, nature, and the understanding of humanity, what the natural order we are living in. So we see that the threat against our existence, and again, Europeans started to take the role as the establisher of the balance, not only in politics, but also in economics. After that, we had the crisis of order. And after that, we have the reality of humanity. And under this order crisis, we have deep fractions. And we can say that in our modern world, we see the annihilation of two things. One of them is the holy order, and the holy order was denied for the establishment of physical world. And in the world, in the universe, the order of universe, our understanding for the order of universe was confronted with a crisis, and political, moral, and society order through the Prophet Muhammad. The call, the order, the message sent by Almighty Allah was ignored, and we have seen the annulment of the funding power of the holy. And as it corresponds to creative characteristics of Allah Almighty and the role of this command, with this annulment of this command, the two activities of establishment were replaced by another perpetrator, which can correspond to human perpetrator, and human was replaced instead of holy order, the order of Allah, the order of Allah through the Prophet. So normally human is trying to act as seizing the unlimited power, but human has limited power, and as a result, as it is enunciated in ayah, this order, due to this replacement, due to this displacement, we see the eruption and dissolution of positions. So this crisis is not solely related to Muslim people. This crisis is related with the disruption of nature, with the disruption of order and abuse of order, not only in political scene but also in environmental and social areas. In the Islamic world, the crisis of order is the continuation of this big crisis. We can ask ourselves whether the will of human throughout the history has the right to determine the position of different areas. So, do we have this role? Do we have this power as humanity to regulate the politics, to regulate the powers? This is wrong. Human being, when we talk about with anthropocentrism understanding, we are talking about a specific kind of humanity, European humanity. Anthropocentrism is converted into Eurocentrism, and at the same time, this is European-centric direction and redesignation of environment, politics, and society. And we also see the abuse due to the misdirection by the Europeans. And as Muslim people, we are not able to see some points. We ignore them. 6 or 7 years ago, during the period of Biden, we had Trump 6 years ago, and after that Biden 8 years ago. When I was following the news, we learned that Trump was elected, and Ministry of Defense in the United States, the Secretary of Defense announced, and he had this explanation and speech towards Pentagon: you are the people for the benevolence of humanity, and you oath to protect humanity, and you will give freedom to humanity, and you have the courage, and you are the hope of whole humanity. You represent America. You represent the United States. So when I first read the explanation of the Secretary of Defense, you will all remember the ayah kuntum hayra ummatin uhricetil nasi tegnila bil marufi tel hunker. And I also shared this news with Professor Ömer, the Secretary of Defense, said to the US community that you are the most auspicious community on this earth, and you will bring human rights, democracy, and then you will be the hope of the whole humanity. So this is the essence of the speech. And we see the American way of life, European way of life, and the way they think. They are actually showing themselves as an offer to the humanity, and they think that this offer is very logical, not solely depending on the power, but with the knowledge they create, with all of the wisdom and will, they create it, and they are also trying to create the order accordingly. And today Muslims actually have a crisis about their offer to the humanity. So throughout the history there are big events. So when these big events happen, they transform the world, and you cannot ignore them. As our Prophet said, the offer to the humanity was an event, was an incident, and after that the outlook of the humanity changed, and the rest of humanity would take it as an example, and this was the order. But starting from 18th, 16th century, as it was also so stated by the Secretary of Defense of US, there is a new form of order, and we see the emergence of orders, and it is also a challenge to our existing order, because two orders will not simultaneously be present in the world. So what would be done? What should be done against this challenge? And in 19th century, we see that the collapse and the Ummah, the Muslim people, started to reshape and understand this offer, and with these challenges, 19th century was the era of suspicion and crisis of suspicion for Islamic world, and all the scholars, philosophers, elites of Islamic world throughout the history, for the first time they expressed their suspicions. So should we stick to our previous goals, or should, with these challenges, should we look at our offer as we are defeated politically, militarily? So what is behind all of this? Islamic values, Islamic way of life. So if this is the reason, then we will put it aside and we will stick to the new order. If we could stick to this order and if we could respond to this positively by abandoning Muslims' own offer and they are being engaged with the new offer, now they imitate things. The Muslim world of these people started to imitate the West's offer, the offer of the Western world, and they abandoned their own offers as Islamic world. And after this, we see the emergence of conservatism. And this conservatism, after this challenging world, we thought that we should get rid of our own offer. If this is the claim, then if we abandon our offer, you will preserve our traditions, our culture. So a new approach emerged, and with this, our offer was frozen in the history. And these were the two ways. And after that, after imitation and after conservatism as the third way, we looked at the scientific frameworks and practices. They thought that we will be able to adapt these scientific improvements by sticking to Muslim values. And with this universe and with the strength out of this, the Islamic civilization is not a block, and we should have reclamation of Islamic values, but again, for the reclamation. So what will be the criteria? How can we reform it? With this understanding, we couldn't answer the questions, and the Western values were taken to the central point, and apologetic understanding of Islam was introduced. And with this introduction, we see that the claim and the offer, unfortunately, we couldn't have any activity to establish this order. The attitude that we should replace, and as we could negotiate throughout this forum, we should see the advantages of and disadvantages of three different methods, and we will be talking about reality, because if we talk about the Muslims once again will remember their own offer and they will understand it, and in their own systems they will allege it, and then in the practical means they will realize it, and with this method, with this new order, they will agree it. And we think that acquittal is important for the Muslim people, and they will have the thinking, and they will be the witness of a new ideal, and they will once again be subjects in the world history, not objects. And in this direction, without further details, we have the crisis of information in the 19th century, and this has not been completed yet, and we have imitation methods of the Western understanding, and we need a new understanding, a novel understanding with self-confidence, and we are going to need a new path, and we need to reopen this book. If we could reopen this book, and if we could open our horizons, then we will be able to reach reality. And for the will and order, for our order, we should enrich our current situation with all the wisdom and with the accumulation of our experiences with the order, and we can witness the humanity, and we will be the owners of this order, and we will have the wills. Otherwise, we will see the decays in this society, and if we see these decays, then we will not be able to reach our hopes and our dreams. So it is very important for us to try the new order, so that we will have a fairer world. And once again, we need to reopen the offer in the 19th century. We need to reopen this, we need to renegotiate this, and we need to reach deep wisdom. And we will not see this as a luxury, we should see this as a priority. And I would like to thank you for your patience.
Evet, İbrahim Hocam teşekkür ediyoruz.
Much, Professor Ibrahim. We are racing against time. And of course, we will be discussing our notes, but maybe we will be discussing them during the forum. Without further delay, I would like to give the floor to Professor Ömer Türker. The title of his speech is Principles and Procedures. Professor Ibrahim described the overall problems we had and the potential solutions. He suggested the method of arbitration, and Professor Ömer Türker will be talking about the principles and procedures, and he will be talking about what we can do about these problems. And you have 15 minutes, Professor. Thank you very much. Distinguished professors and members of the audience, welcome. Inshallah, this forum will be auspicious. It has very detailed session titles, and I would like to offer a short explanation about the principles, and the prayer time is coming, so I have to hurry. The principles refer to the overall rules. The word principle is used for all areas that create the base of research in sciences, in society, in physics, mathematics. We have overall rules, and all of the information is based on those principles or rules aligned with those principles. And procedure. Procedure has two meanings. The first one is, from these rules or principles, and knowledge is produced. Procedure is the way we produce that knowledge. So the procedure is the method. When we're talking about history of speech, we talk about these procedures like usul-i hadith, Burhan method, or other methods. The procedure has a second meaning. In Turkish, it is rather about the way of implementation of the knowledge that is gained from the principles. So the procedure is also about execution of knowledge. So any knowledge that is produced in mathematics, in ethics, in fiqh or hadith, any information that is produced, the execution of any knowledge in this area is known as the procedure. So broadly speaking, institutional, it refers to in governance, it refers to the procedure of institutionalization. For example, the state has the duty to ensure security of citizens, so the legal mechanisms that create that security is the procedure. The relationship between the principle and procedure is not a one-way relationship, as we can go from principles to procedures. So, or we can go vice versa. The procedure also tells us how to deal with the essence or the topic that we are trying to deal with. So this is a bidirectional relationship. Why do I say this? There are two important crises in the Islamic world. The first one is the crisis of knowledge, and it emerged as a result of the development of modern knowledge. And the second problem is the problem of power, the crisis of power, which led to a crisis of will. So the crisis of knowledge led to a crisis of sovereignty and is a crisis of ruling, and it led to a crisis of knowledge. And starting from early 19th century to present, the intellectuals and scholars of the Muslim world faced with these problems only in a selected number of areas. If you pay attention, they try to understand crisis with reference to principles, but they focused on the procedures, the way of execution or manhaj. That's why in the Islamic world, to reproduce knowledge, they tried to transfer methods from the West. And then the problems in interpretation of the Quran emerged. And the governments made strict decisions in implementation. They reformed the educational and political institutions, the state structure. They reformed the security mechanisms. So we saw a very broad area of modernization in the Islamic world. And we cannot say there is a clarity about the domains where the crisis is involved. This system, we assume that this crisis of knowledge has encompassed all areas. It's like, sometimes we tend to think that the modern science emerged as a result of secular worldview, but the modern science is not a success of secularism. The modern science, although it supported the domination of a secular perspective, there is a difference between the secular life and the religious life. And the science developed despite the presence of a church. And of course, some of the people, the figures who led scientific research were actually members of the clergymen. For example, Darwin was a priest. Understanding this helps us understand which principles are in crisis and which principles are affected by crisis. So, any body of knowledge in the modern world it's only a hypothesis that the whole body of the knowledge in the modern world is in a crisis due to modern science, but due to metaphysical perspectives. But we cannot say that there is a crisis of our physical assumptions. The second thing is that in some domains of knowledge, the principles are in crisis. Yes, the modern physics was established with a clear rupture from the classical understanding of physics. The same happened with the mathematics, particularly in physics and mathematics. The principles of the classical world were undermined, or the principal parts became complementary parts. The assumption that the principles of the Islamic world is in crisis should be reviewed. The involvement of relativity in this regard should be taken into consideration, because the assumption that the whole modern knowledge is in crisis does not seem to be true. Yes, we adopted the modern mathematics and we did not have any problems in producing knowledge in that area, but our crisis is in the second context. The second biggest crisis in physics and mathematics is that the principles building social life and the procedures were in crisis, actually, in the implementation and methods of these principles. In the West, not only in mathematics and physics, but also in history, sociology, anthropology, history of religions, theology, and in many other areas, methods of knowledge producing were not proven wrong by the modern ways of producing knowledge, but it only narrowed down its scope. In pre-Islam period, hearsay was not disciplined, but the Muslims disciplined it. But in the Western civilization, the research on hearsay demonstrated that some things were missing and discovered new aspects of knowledge. In classical period, Muslims built linguistic sciences. They conducted linguistic research, but the modern linguistic sciences did not prove those studies wrong, but only demonstrated the gaps in them. So it also demonstrated that some aspects of linguistic sciences were disregarded by Muslim researchers. And in understanding sociology, in understanding the political science, the same thing happened. So all of the crises in procedures should not be considered as a crisis of principles. Most of these crises are related to procedures. The actual crisis about the social being are related to the principles that we can talk about, that we can think that we can address in the context of classical Islam. I would like to wrap up. What I mean is, The modern era, partially in principles, but mostly in procedures, we have a crisis. We have a crisis in our way of understanding and interpreting these principles. This crisis of method, with both meanings, can be resolved without leading to a major crisis. But we should start by facing the crisis related to principles. So we need to accept the crisis that we have in metaphysics. We need to profoundly understand that the problems we have in mathematics and physics will not undermine our gains in knowledge, and we need to transform into a will and readdress our efforts to build social life. In this meaning, in the contact of the Muslim world with the classical era and as the Muslim world has a better ability to understand the classical knowledge, it can overcome this crisis. So we have come a very long way in understanding the causes of this crisis, and on the basis of our principles, we can take into consideration the modern sciences when addressing these issues. I hope that these efforts will help us walk this journey with more confident steps and with more accurate decisions. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ömer. We have many notes. We need to move fast because of time limit, but hopefully we will be talking about these issues in a broader framework over the next 3 days. And without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Dr. Ahmet Ayhan Çitil. You have 10 minutes. Then I will not use my notes. Hello, dear colleagues. I never get an answer when I say hello. Why? We say Muslims should greet each other, but we don't say hello to each other. Why? Selamun alaikum. Alaikum salam. Well, it's basically the same thing. It's a way of greeting. So, welcome. I would like to thank the organizers for this event. Well, actually, I prepared a PowerPoint but I decided not to use them because I have limited time. Professor Ibrahim described the problem in the historical context very well. He established the relationship of this issue with the concept of knowledge and will. And Professor Ömer said we still have the same principles, we just need to revisit them. So I will be talking about the current situation. Actually, we have a crisis in the Islamic world. It is the crisis of being an actor. We have to be an auspicious ummah for the humanity, but we have our own problems and humanity has its own problems. As Professor Numan mentioned, we need to be confident about ourselves and address these problems. But actually we do not have that confidence, and sometimes we are not concerned about these problems. I think this summit also aims to do that. It aims to encourage people to think about these problems and offer solutions. I will be talking about the academic aspect of the problem. Did we always have this kind of schizoid type of problem in academia? No. In the classical era, we could address issues in a holistic way in the academia. And we had made significant progress in sciences, and particularly the classical metaphysics helped us bring together the positive sciences, the natural sciences, and social sciences. So you read Sina, Avicenna, and in the same book, he can talk about the medicine and physics, as well as metaphysical concepts like the angels. As Professor Ömer mentioned, a critique of the metaphysics or elimination of metaphysics from philosophical discourse is not reasonable. The idea that we need to move from a metaphysical way of understanding to a more materialistic way of understanding resulted in undermining the metaphysics, and we had this major problem. And later, this led to a divorce between knowledge and metaphysics, and any knowledge could be expressed in specific limits, as Kant mentioned about the universe or God or history. We cannot get any scientific knowledge. That idea became more eminent, and we had to move ahead according to that. However, people cannot help but ask these questions to themselves. Why did I come from? Where am I going to? What does it mean to be a human? I wish I had more time to explain this. In time, these questions were addressed in a more academic context, but not in a metaphysical context in the academia. The mainstream project, it started creating the background of the mainstream studies in academia. For example, can we produce language in a non-human atmosphere? For example, this is the question that we ask in the context of AI today. Can the human's mental activity be reduced to a biological activity? Can we understand the beginning and the end of the universe only by looking at the rules of physics? So it's not just limited to natural sciences. Can we create a political order that will stop exclusion of communities? Now we have the AI projects which involves multiple disciplines. But on the other side of the coin, this dialectical discussion has another meaning. Scientists try to offer solutions in areas that were previously addressed by metaphysics, but since they have some ideological concerns, any academic concerns or programs have an ideological core, and we are not very comfortable about them. I will wrap up with this if I manage to explain this. What I mean is, developing AI as a tool is not a problem. We can also do that. But if you're talking about singularity, so if you're saying that mankind will make a final discovery and anything else will be discovered by AI. So we are trying to create something superior than people, then it's about ideology. Yes, you start discussing whether humans are social things or not. Well, reducing consciousness to neural activity is not it does not enrich us spiritually. While we work on this project, we are working to exclude the God aspect from the academia. Some students come to us and ask if they will be sinning if they work on projects related to AI. We need to build a society where humans are the final objectives. That's a beautiful objective, but as you dig deeper, you see that all of those sociology or political science projects are actually instances of activism that attempt to devalue the principles of Islam. For example, some people suggested Islamization of knowledge, and that's very important, but I think it's not enough. It's necessary, but it's not enough.
Şu olduğunu düşünüyorum.
In one direction, it is like building irregular or illegal houses on the land that we have, that we own. So, where were we? We should go back. And with this current information system, it is not possible, or it's not right strategy to Muslimize those outputs. So we need to add up our own questions, and we need to open new ways and new areas, new rooms in the academia. We need to be aware of our disadvantages, and we need to overcome this. And I think that this part should be underlined during Istanbul Forum. If you don't do this, then you will not be able to go further. And of course, for union, with these principles, with these existence, we need to understand the understanding of information where we will take part in academia. And I would like to extend my salutations to each and every one of you. Mr. Ahmet, Ayhan, Çitil, thank you very much for your valuable sentences. In the 21st century, for the production of information, he has mentioned a different method, and today and in the coming days we will be discussing new experiences and new opportunities. Taking this chance, I will end this session as the moderator. Once again, I would like to thank each and every one of you for participating in our session. So this is the end of our session.